We look for our geography lesson from you now. Ever since you took over the chair, we find that we get to talk to you, and you're usually on a different mountaintop every time we call you. Where are you today?
I am currently sitting looking at the western terminus of the Chenectado Marine Railway, some lovely windmills, a new dike being built, and the former village of Beaubassin. So where am I, Bill?
Oh, you're out there on the grasslands almost.
Fort Lawrence, my home stomping ground.
Your home stomping ground, yeah. That's a deeply rich in cultural history. The Acadians, of course, to say the least, and a deeper part of Cumberland County history that we oftentimes forget about,
Yep, absolutely. It's an absolutely beautiful view here this morning. Nice sunny morning here in Fort Lawrence, and again, you can see all of that from one spot, which is a pretty cool thing to be able to do.
We need to talk about yesterday's meeting of council. Of course, it was a committee of the whole meeting, which means, again, that's a whole bunch of reports, a whole lot of detail. And there were a few things in there that caused, I was going to say consternation, but that's not quite it. I think there were just some things that some people were looking at differently, I'll say. But the very first item that I caught on the agenda, once you get through the regular, automatic stuff, was the discussion of a hospitality policy. And for those who don't understand it, that's when you, as mayor, or maybe the chief administrative officer, or your designates, are out perhaps entertaining a guest, or wining and dining a special person who might be bringing business to the county, or any number of other things. And we don't think of the mayor or the council and so on being involved in the hospitality side of things, but it's a fact of life. And you have a policy that kind of dictates, just what you can spend and how you can spend it and why you can spend it. What's the change, if any, that's being made?
It's a matter of just updating the policy and updating the reporting requirements around it. And making sure that everyone is the rules are up to date and have been revamped, and the policy basically outlines what you can and cannot do, and it falls in line with all of the other policy work we did at our last meeting, I believe in December, around council expenses and expense claims for staff and all of that type of stuff, and it's just a defining policy that's needed. Just to make sure that everybody's aware of the rules.
Now, the interesting thing is it dictates what the mayor or the chief administrative officer can do. It doesn't refer to the councillors in this case, except under the banner where it says the mayor or your designate. Same with the CAO. He might designate somebody else to take somebody to lunch or whatever the case may be. Kind of what are the general parameters of what you can and can't do?
Well, it talks about getting prior authorization for events and looking at the rationale and purpose behind the event, and if alcohol is to be provided or served at the event, or if it's not, itemized cost, including like gratuities and supplementary expenses, all those types of things. So
it doesn't happen a lot, though, does it?
No, not at all. And you know what? It's interesting that when you say it doesn't happen a lot, those are the ones that potentially, that we have to be, aware and careful of. The stuff that happens every day or every week or every month, you tend to be very aware of all the rules and parameters. And then you'll run into something that you do maybe once or twice a year, or maybe even not even that often. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, what are the rules? What do we have to do? You tend to, the longer apart the events are, the more chance there is to for something not to be done absolutely correctly, right?
Yeah. Now, there was a lot of time spent yesterday at the meeting talking about land use bylaws, shoreline buffers. It's all about the further discussion on how you can take advantage and make use of what were called undersized lots. And Glenn Boone, the Director of Development and Planning, he's been on the hot seat front and center for a very, very long time. The busiest department, I think, in all the county right now. And of course, he's brought forward some suggestions and thoughts to the council to consider, because there are a lot of small lots out there that, especially when you think of lots along waterfront properties and so on, where the bylaws are pretty strict on how you can build and what you can build. And that means then that there's a lot of lots where current rules say you can't build at all. And you're moving toward the possibility, but it's not an easy discussion. It opens up a lot of debate, I found yesterday.
No, you're absolutely correct, Bill. And the thrust of this whole thing has been to grow our assessment organically. That's been one of our targets from day one, and this is a method by which that can happen rather easily. We spent a lot of time discussing increased lot coverages, and our current lot coverage on undersized lots, and all lots for that matter, is 10%, and we're looking to bump that up to 25, which in the R-Rec zone, which is cottage country, there's more undersized lots than anything else. And, you got people coming and saying, listen, I want to add 2 feet to the back of my cottage, or 2 feet onto my bathroom, or I want to add a sun porch, or I want to do this or whatever. And the answer's been no, because for the most part, a lot of these existing cottages are already over the 10% lot coverage, the current lot coverage rule. So it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for people to do improvements to their properties in a manner that makes sense and all of that. So, and it's been an ongoing issue with our planning staff. Probably the number one issue for them, having to say no to these people and being, and all of that. And it's when it doesn't seem like it makes any sense. So we're going to try, and it's a bit of a common sense approach in that regard. The other side of that, sidebar to that, was a discussion about waterfront setbacks and buffer zones and all of that. And I mean, council has been absolutely engaged, which is what I just love about them. They ask a lot of questions. They do a lot of digging and homework, and and we have a very lively discussion some days. And one of the things that we discovered in part of this process and trying to move some of this along is that part didn't fit for us right now, because we're lacking some information about the coastal protection and shoreline, like the 50-year storm, the 100-year storm, and where the water will be and all of that. That information is coming out from the province now, but we don't have it all or anywhere close to all of it yet. So the smart thing there was to defer that to a future point, and we'll go back and revisit that once we have all the information from the government.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the province, because, of course, they passed what they call the Coastline Protection Act a number of years ago, and the Liberal government back in the day, and they did not proclaim it. And, of course, then the Conservatives took over, and they were expecting them to proclaim it, and they didn't really. In fact, they kind of changed it and said, rather than us setting the rules, we'll let the municipalities set the rules. And they put it back in your lap. A lot of people think that's a mistake, and that it puts an undue pressure on you, not you personally, but you, the municipality. And at the same time, the province is suggesting changing other things that are in your bailiwick. For example, they've been pushing the idea of having, what do they call it, a granny suite type thing, building a tiny home maybe in your backyard to relieve the pressure on the housing shortage and so on. And under your current bylaws and so on, that wouldn't be allowed. So, the province is coming up with certain rules or directions, but they turn it over to you again to go fix it. I won't ask you if that's fair or not, but it is leading a lot of conversation in your council meetings.
Yeah, and again, what the question of fairness is one question, but you know what? It's typical of the life and times that we live in now, and the increased need for housing and all of the things that surround that. So we've got to find a way forward very quickly to deal with all of those issues, and it's one step at a time. But it's certainly all of that in our planning department and all in the municipality. That's almost our number one focus right now, is to get these changes moved forward first. Then we're going to look at the zoning map and doing some rezoning. We're going to look at some land use bylaws, and because every day there's something new coming in. It's either a tiny home or it's increased multifamily. Like our old laws said that you could do up to, say, 4 units on a particular property, and now that doesn't work. They're demanding more of us, so now we have to look at that and say, can we move it to 6? Do we move it to 8? And that's going on all across the county right now.
And everywhere else, for that matter. There was also some interesting dialogue, some of the councillors asking questions or giving a thank you to your various departmental directors for the what job they're doing. And when it came to talking about plans for recreation services and so on, I was not surprised to hear some councillors say, we're hearing a lot about great activity in the former towns of Parsboro and Spring Hill, but not hearing much, if anything, about the rest of the rural area of the county. And of course, Pugwash thinks of itself as having a kind of mini town, if you want to call it that. It is formally known as a village. But the suggestion that, some of the things that are going on in the former towns, highly attractive, are not happening elsewhere. And Pugwash wants in on the action, you might say. They've been asking for sidewalks and crosswalk developments, for example, and that gets to be a thorny thing, apparently.
Well, it's not such a thorny thing from the point of view that there's no thorns that that we look at and say, well, it's not ours, or we can't do it, or whatever. Or they don't want to help us, or there's none of that at all. The problem that we have, or the difficulty, I should say, in Pugwash, is that all of the roads and all the streets are owned by the province of Nova Scotia. Unlike the towns of Spring Hill and Parsboro. So there's some work to be done there to say, are we going to be doing the sidewalks? Is the province going to be doing the sidewalks? Are we going to do it together? Are we going to figure out a different way forward? And there's also some infrastructure work that needs to be done in Pugwash, and most of it is buried in those provincial streets, for lack of a better term. So there has to be some talk about what's going to happen with that and around all of that. So. And you know what? Those talks are ongoing, and we'll sort of ramp up over the next few months to a full scale discussion about the viability of all of that and going forward. So.
Now we know that when you sought the position as mayor, that you had your eyes wide open and you understood it wasn't just a matter of being the chair of the meetings a couple of times a month. You were making a commitment to be busy and to travel around and kind of be here, there, and everywhere. And you've been doing that. So, I want to ask, aside from yesterday's meeting, what have you been up to the last couple of days? I know you've been on the road.
Well, it's always interesting, but we're basically in that spot now. We just finished our priorities, council priorities, last of our council priority sessions yesterday afternoon, and made some decisions on all of that, which was another very great discussion with everybody involved. So we'll get a wrap up on that and a more finite list over the next few days from the staff members and the department heads that were present. They'll draw it all into one document that each councilor will receive and whatever. But I've had I always try to build bridges and be proactive about, what can we do next and where's our next project coming from and how's it going to be funded and who's going to be a partner with us. I mean, I've had several discussions with Mayor Small in Amherst since he got elected and I got elected. And they're very, very good conversations. He's a great guy to work with, Mayor Small is. And this past week we had a very, very strong and very busy meeting in Spring Hill regarding geothermal energy. A number of people there from across the province. And Minister Rushton was there for the whole meeting, which was absolutely appreciated by everybody concerned. And there's a lot of discussion around geothermal and the potential for one of the big projects that's talked about is a greenhouse using geothermal energy to help with the food insecurity situation in Cumberland County, and it's a project that everybody seems very excited about. Hopefully, at some point in the very near future, it will get organized to the point where we'll start to try and figure out how to get it on the ground and how to make it happen so that it works and all the people that are involved. So that was a very good meeting. We had a great meeting with some representatives from ACOA this week to talk about what programs are going on with them and what they're most interested in and what other municipalities perhaps might be doing that we are not aware of and might be very interested in bringing forward for our group. So yeah, and then obviously all of the other ones is the meetings around the county with the various groups, the Parsboro Library Group, and the work that's going on there. We're waiting on the report to come back from the consultants for that, and then as soon as that comes back and we get to work on it, that ball will start to roll, and we'll try and figure out a way forward for that one. So we're finishing the fire hall in Spring Hill, so down and have a look at how that building's coming along. Spent a lot of time in all corners of the county in the last couple of weeks, so it seems. So.